Hi guys, Artie here, and as much as people want a 24-hour Adult Swim channel in the US, including me, it's unlikely it'll ever come into fruition. I decided to make a video on this because the Twitter user, Keon, who is also one of the people in charge of the CN Schedules account, made some good points about how Adult Swim will never become 24 hours, and it interested me, so why not cover it? Also, this is unintentionally a sequel to the video I made last year where I explained why Adult Swim should become 24 hours, so maybe watch that video after this one to compare my thoughts then and now. If there's a point I don't cover here, I likely already covered it in the old video. The three possible routes when planning a 24-hour Adult Swim is whether to have it consume Cartoon Network's remaining hours, take over another channel's space, or launch a brand new channel. Let's start out by ruling out that last option. Starting a new cable channel from the ground up in the year 2024 is out of the question. It would be very expensive, unviable, and a waste of time to launch a whole new cable channel in the year 2024 when the medium is standing on its last legs. That's not even including the biggest hurdle, is trying to make the channel as widely available as possible, and they would have to make carriage deals with all the cable providers, which takes quite a while. TV channels aren't available in every corner of the country the second they launch. There were some places that did not get Comedy Central until South Park premiered. Hell, some cable systems didn't carry Cartoon Network until the early 2000s. Let's also not forget the I Want My MTV campaign from the mid to late 80s. A more recent example is that it took a couple of months for MeTV Toons to be available in the majority of the US over the air. And it is still not available on most cable providers. As of writing this, I believe the only cable company that carries MeTV Toons is Spectrum, and even then, it's only in select regions. Then there's the second option, have Adult Swim take over the remaining 11 hours currently occupied by Cartoon Network. I don't think they'll kill off CN entirely because the shows will have nowhere to go. Well, except Discovery Family, but they're not affiliated with the Cartoon Network Inc., and besides, they can only fit so much on the schedule. There is also the option of putting CN over the air for free, but that'll happen when pigs fly. But if you really think about it, Cartoon Network at this point airs enough EI content on the Cartoonito block to fulfill the FCC guidelines EI requirements, so it is technically possible to launch a Diginet version of Cartoon Network. There isn't much to lose anyways, since they have very few advertisers remaining, which is the reason why they run off the clock on weekday mornings, as the advertisers jumped ship to YouTube to indoctrinate iPad kids with Lunchly or whatever stupid and potentially harmful fad grade schoolers are into these days. It can't be that expensive to launch an over-the-air network. There's dozens of worthless and junk OTA networks littering the airwaves such as Daystar and Rewind TV, and all those shopping channels that are somehow still around. The main concern with launching an OTA channel is availability, in that whether you get them or not depends on where you live. And then there's the last option. Kill off another channel to replace it with Adult Swim. So let's list off the potential candidates for channels to be replaced. HLN, they're still required to carry CNN's mediocre mainstream slop news. For Boomerang, if it had more availability, I could see them replacing it with a 24/7 Adult Swim. However, Xfinity doesn't carry the channel, giving it poor coverage. If that wasn't the case, it would be more plausible since MeTV Toons has pretty much replaced Boomerang's purpose of being a classic cartoon channel, so why not? There is also truTV, but it's currently being revitalized as a half sports channel, and the other half of the channel being Impractical Jokers and American Dad reruns. I want to ask, why does Warner Bros. Discovery need to use 3 different channels for broadcasting sports? I know they have the rights to some baseball, basketball, and I believe hockey games. Correct me on that if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure they can manage to fit all their sports telecasts onto TBS and TNT. And as for Adult Swim replacing any of the other Turner networks, yeah, no. They can't and they won't kill one of their core networks by giving up TBS or TNT. Not gonna happen. And then there's all the stagnant Discovery-owned networks such as Destination America and Discovery Life that don't do much. However, they can't be replaced since they're from a different division of WBD and not one of the legacy Turner networks. Before moving on to the subject of programming, if Adult Swim were to actually split off from Cartoon Network, where would that leave CN? Now they have 13 extra hours of programming to fill, so the evening and overnight hours will likely just be more reruns. At the same time, I could see them using those hours for a Boomerang block, since classic cartoons seem to rate well these days. And not everyone has Boomerang. It's not going to be like the checkerboard era, where they were 24 hours and had a different show playing every half hour. But the schedule would be a similar style to how early 2010's Nicktoons Network was. Putting all the factors of launching a 24-hour Adult Swim aside, and let's say they somehow figured it out, what would the programming and schedule be like? If it were to run in the daytime, the schedule would look identical to how FXX is, with 3 to 4 hour stretches of Fox shows all day and maybe a movie or two right before noon, since the Fox Toons rate the best. There could be some checkered past and anime midday, but other than that, the schedule will have a remarkable resemblance to Adult Swim Canada or FXX. They've tried and tried before, but the only success the US has had with Adult Swim originals in the evening hours is with Rick and Morty in the Boondocks. Sometimes they've had success with anime early into the night like with Dragon Ball Z Kai back in 2018, but that's about it. They've mostly stuck with Fox shows during those hours because they reel in the highest ratings, and it's good to start out with some mellow shows before getting into the nitty-gritty later into the night. Even though Adult Swim has built up a modest library of originals by now, they only rate well during the overnight hours. For context, when Adult Swim Canada first launched in 2019, they had a solid lineup with Adult Swim originals throughout the day early on. About a year later, they gave up and the schedule began to be filled up with Fox cartoons, and the channel truly doesn't kick into gear until 7 PM. Not that many people know about this, but Canadian cable TV channels are required to air a certain amount of hours of Canadian-produced programming, meaning AS Canada interestingly airs shows like Bob and Margaret as filler. On the opposite end of the Americas, Adult Swim Latin America does not have any of the Fox shows because the rights are different down there and they're owned by Star. Instead, they mostly air Warner Bros. Animation action shows, the Checkered Past shows, and Adult Swim originals. They interestingly have the DC shows, and they're cheaper to license in Latin America because the rates are different internationally, and also economic reasons. While we don't have them here in America because WBD is charging absurd and unreasonable amounts of money for them for some reason. Gotta love those intercorporate deals. I'm also surprised that they haven't aired any of the Checkered Past shows outside of the block in the US, like they do in Latin America. It would feel like the Adult Swim thing to do if they had an additional airing of Dexter's Lab at say like 5:30 AM, right before CN signs on, and would also provide a good buffer and transition between the two blocks. I feel like the reason why a 24-hour Adult Swim works in Latin America is because having advertisements doesn't play a major factor, unlike in the US, hence why their schedule always runs off the clock. Meanwhile, the 24-hour Adult Swim Canada also works because, well, it's Canada. I believe there was also a larger demand for a 24-hour Adult Swim in Canada than in the US. The final point I want to go over before closing out is that if Adult Swim really wanted to go 24 hours, they would have done so a decade ago when they were still at their peak, reeling in 2 million viewers during primetime consistently. The argument that can be made is that the television landscape is vastly different now than it was 10 years ago, since mainly adults watch cable TV and viewership from the child demographics is dwindling. But even then, it may be too late. Maybe Adult Swim will steal another hour or two from Cartoon Network at most, but I doubt they'll take over the entire channel. Right now it seems almost perfectly balanced, and both channels' schedules are pretty decent at the moment. So there isn't much reason to fix what ain't broke. The channel space is currently optimized for the best viewership and demographics. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, notify, and check out other videos on the channel. You may like them. Despite everything, do you still think a 24-hour Adult Swim channel in the US is possible? Let me know in the comments.